While we were all paying attention to other issues, we just lost the separation of church and state. So yesterday we had a Supreme Court decision which really changed the balance of the separation of church and state in this country for the worse, and I just want to just talk a little bit about it. The case was Carson v. Martin, and it involved a town that didn't have a high school, so they had this. They didn't have a public high school, so they had this private high school, this religious school, and they had a voucher system, and the voucher system wouldn't allow this religious school to get the voucher, and they had no other choice. And so this puts two things against each other. Um, First of all, we've got the separation of church and state, right? The government cannot fund religious exercise. That prefers religious exercise over non religious exercise. Um, and the other side was the free exercise clause. Now, the free exercise clause is best shown, in my opinion, if you look back at the COVID lockdowns. There was a period of time during the COVID lockdowns where churches were locked down, but Walmarts were allowed to be opened. That's clearly discrimination against religion, right? And that was overturned by the Supreme Court, and I think it was by the Supreme Court, but rightfully so, because telling the church that they can't operate when you're telling a non-religious entity that they can operate is religious discrimination. And so we've got this town in Maine, I think it was, where the only reason that this school wasn't getting funding was because it was religious. And so this case, this conflict between the free exercise clause and the establishment clause is what went to the Supreme Court. Can you discriminate against a religious organization for public funds, or must you discriminate against religious organizations for public funds? And the Supreme Court said, yes, you can give public funds to religious organizations. And so that changed everything. Justice Sotomayor said, in just a few years, the court has upended the constitutional doctrine, shifting from a rule that permits states to decline to fund religious organizations to one that requires states in many circumstances to subsidize religious indoctrination with taxpayer dollars. And she's right. We have switched feet now. You remember the RFRA switched the burden of proof from being able to prove that you needed to commit to law to prove that the state needed to enforce the law. So it shifted the balance of power, and that gave us the Hobby Lobby decision. This is one of those decisions. This is shifting the power from separation of church and state to free exercise. We've essentially lost a lot of the separation of church and state with this cause. Okay, now when you look at public school vouchers, they will. When you look at private school vouchers, there is no more argument anymore with regard to whether or not you can just give vouchers to non-religious private schools. That's off the table now. All vouchers are going to include private schools, and that includes religious schools. And that means, as Justice Sotomayor said, religious indoctrination on the public dime now begins. This is terrible. It's a major blow to our system, and the only way around it is with legislation. And we ain't going to get positive legislation, I don't think, on this from either side, frankly. I don't think the Democrats are going to fight for it, and I certainly know the Republicans aren't going to fight for it. I think this is a loss. I think this is a big, huge loss. And, I think the ramifications of this go way beyond vouchers, go way beyond this kind of stuff. It basically puts free exercise of religion above separation of church and state. So now we're going to see, we're going to see much more preaching from the pulpit, I think, because they get to do that, because it's not a separation of church and state issue as much as anymore as it is a free exercise issue. So where do we go from here? We have just lost a major battle, if not the major separation of church and state battle of our lifetimes. This is, I mean, it could be the major death knell to the separation of church and state, because now people have their free exercise clause, which outranks separation of church and state. It's bad. The more you think about it, the worse you get. I don't want to hyperbolize, but this could be the death of the separation of church and state if the people have the right to to free exercise above the separation of church and state. Just think about how many times a person will say, I get to do this because it's my free exercise of religion, even if it breaks the separation of church and state. And we know that one outranks the other now. So it's very, very bad. So what do we do now? Well, it's up to the atheist movement, folks. This is where the atheist movement comes in. It's up to you guys to take this battle and lead on. It's up to you to put together alliances between Republicans and Democrats. Yes, Republicans and Democrats, you need both sides to separate church and state and protect people from having to fund religious indoctrination with their tax dollars. This is a major blow, and it's time for the atheist movement to stand up and fight. I hope and expect that they know this. I have not done any research as to whether or not they are doing anything. I'm sure, I'm hopeful that all those organizations are planning their attacks and are coordinating with each other so that they can put together a coordinated effort to put together an alliance of local, state, and national politicians to defeat the funding of religion on a legislative level. That is our only chance to do it, because it's downhill from here. We're going to see private school vouchers right away, but most importantly, I think we're going to see prayer back in school, because the teacher can exercise her free exercise of religion clause, even if it breaks the separation of church and state. We're just going to see a lot more, and there's going to be a lot more work for the atheist movement to do. I hope they rise to the effort and do it. I am encouraging them. I'm behind them. Do the stuff. Good luck. And to the rest of us, you might want to remember this day. You might want to remember this loss. This is one of those major court decisions, I fear, that has changed the country for the worse permanently. So, sorry to be the bearer of bad news, but please like, comment, and share if you appreciate this content. Thanks. Have a great day.